Black Clover is one of those series that I think does just enough right for it to be really entertaining. And things might come off as me saying the series doesn't have any deep themes or anything like that. Trust me, that's not what I'm saying. Take this compliment at face value. For the most part, this series is really entertaining. And I did say mostly entertaining because with the recent Spade arc, I just haven't been feeling the series near as much. And that's why I decided to make this video. It might come off as a little weird, but I want to talk about the stuff that I really liked with the series to see if that could help inspire me to really get into it again. Because like I said, I have just not been liking this Spade arc at all. Now, the first great thing that this series does is it makes amazing characters. That's the most blatantly obvious aspect that I can point out. Asta, despite everything anybody says about him, is an amazing main character, or at least really good. I feel like amazing might be pushing it, but something that I really do appreciate about him is that even though he's inspired by characters like Naruto, he still has stuff that makes him distinctly different. And if I'm being honest here, there's some drawbacks to Naruto that Asta just doesn't have. I don't feel like the character ever conflicts with some of his major themes. This is something that I definitely see within Naruto. And I don't want to get sidetracked at all here, but there are distinct aspects that I really do enjoy about Asta above characters that inspired his entire creation. Now, continuing on, and I don't want to be stuck on characters forever, so I'm going to be kind of speedrunning this. Next up we have Yami, probably the most liked character, the fan favorite character of the entire series. He is 100% worthy to be mentioned in the same sentence, in the same breath, as characters like Kisuke, Kakashi, Gojo. All those guys have a similar feeling to them, even if their personalities do conflict a lot. And out of all the characters I just said, Yami is the most different from all of them. But then moving on to Noelle, and she, when it comes to character writing, I feel like she gets the most amount of appreciation. And I think this is because within the cast of Black Clover, most of the characters are pretty static. Not saying that they don't get development, but their development is different. Basically, with dynamic characters like Noelle, the changes are more drastic and a lot more noticeable. Compare that to the other static characters within the series like Asta, Yami, Magna, Luck. All those characters, they do of course develop within the series, but at the same time they do keep their same personality throughout the entire thing without having super noticeable changes. But then we move on to Zora, a character that I really like, also another fan favorite. I would say he sticks out a little bit more than characters like Luck and Magna within the series. Of course, he was introduced way later on, but whenever it comes to his backstory, his character design, I feel like it's a lot more distinct than everybody else. And then I want to group up these last four people and just talk about all of them at the same time, because I feel mostly the same about all of them. That being Finral, Magna, Vanessa, and Luck. They're all super enjoyable characters that do play a role within the story, but what I really want to mention with these characters and what I think makes them so valuable is how the author incorporates them into the story. Compare this to other series like, let's say, Naruto, where they forget about their side characters, they push them to the background even further than they already were. Black Clover seems to take a different approach. Within Naruto, the actual main character leaves other characters like Rock Lee, Neji, Shikamaru, he leaves all of them in the dust where it's very hard for them to stay relevant. Shikamaru manages to stay way more relevant than anybody else, but when you're talking about characters like Rock Lee, they can't stay relevant. It's very hard for them. And this is of course because of the power gap, which I will get into in a second, but Black Clover doesn't really seem to have this problem. No matter how powerful our main character becomes, the actual side characters, even characters that aren't within the Black Bulls, manage to stay somewhat within at least maybe the same ballpark or something like that. Basically, they stay relevant to the story. And that's what I appreciate about the overall character writing within Black Clover. But I did mention it a second ago, and this is the power gap, and I'll also be talking about the power system within Black Clover. Now, just quickly glossing over the actual power system, that being magic and grimoires, I think it works great. Having a whole society pretty much reliant on magic makes a lot of sense, and especially incorporating that with our main character, given that he doesn't have magic at all. It all just makes perfect sense, and then giving him a grimoire that has anti-magic capabilities. I don't want to be too redundant, but it all just makes sense. But talking about what I actually wanted to talk about is the power gap, because this is where things start to get a little bit dicey for me. Because at the beginning of the story, I really liked this aspect where all the characters stayed really close to Asta, and in concept I do like that still. It's just in execution. Whenever it comes to the Spade arc, I'm liking it less and less. But essentially, whenever Asta gets a power up, usually the side characters within the Black Bulls specifically, and sometimes even outside of the Black Bulls, the other characters get some sort of power up as well. And usually I'd be 100% fine with this, as it worked really well all the way up into the beginning of the Spade arc or the end of the Elf arc. But it's just the rate at which power-ups have been happening has been increasing, at least it seems that way. And it's just something that kind of gets frustrating and I guess taxing on the story when characters are constantly getting power-ups. And it also doesn't help that I think a lot of the times the forms don't really look that good, specifically when talking about the newest form for Asta. He does look pretty goofy, and I feel like everybody else getting power-ups on top of that, just power-up after power-up, I do think that it contributed to me not really enjoying the series as much anymore. Now, I've talked about things that I like and things that I felt really 50-50 on, like with the power gap system, but something that I feel more or less indifferent about is the overarching plot within Black Clover. It's essentially, and I know that it's still at the same time pretty different, but his end goal is to become the Wizard King, aka pretty similar to Naruto becoming the Hokage. Of course, it lacks any form of originality, which a lot of times originality can be extremely overrated, but whenever it comes to just looking at the overarching plot for Black Clover, it does leave me pretty uninterested for the most part. Not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing obviously, but Asta reaching his end goal as Wizard King isn't something I'm greatly anticipating. And now that I think about it more in depthly, at least a little bit, it does sound pretty bad. At least when it comes to a series maintaining longevity. And lastly, I wanted to talk about the world building, and this is going to be really quick, but at first we see some dungeons within the story. This feels very Maggie-ish, and I really did like it, and in all honesty, I want to see more of stuff like this. There are other villages, but mostly just exploring other kingdoms, which has been fine, and it's something I wish Naruto would have done, but like I said, I'm not enjoying the Spade Kingdom arc really at all. And this is mostly due to the antagonist just not really being all that interesting in my opinion, but at the same time I don't feel like the Spade Kingdom has been that interesting either, just from a world building perspective. But then lastly, something else that I really appreciated within the world building aspect is stuff like the Witch's Forest. I think more stuff like this and dungeons should be incorporated into the story, where you find rare artifacts and rare forms of magic. I really like that aspect, and it does feel very RPG-ish to me. And whenever it comes to a series like Black Clover, where a large part of the series is heavily influenced by Western European culture, I do think that more stuff like that could be really interesting for the series, and of course incorporate into the overarching plot, and I think stuff like that would just work really well. And like I said at the beginning, I made this video because I want to get back into Black Clover. The only problem is this arc seems largely uninteresting to me, but at the same time I really do want to catch up. I'm caught up on Jujutsu Kaisen, and I've been really enjoying that story, and same with My Hero Academia, despite me not really liking My Hero Academia overall nearly as much as I like Black Clover. It's just that with stuff like MHA and JJK, I feel like the quality has gone up, while Black Clover, it took a pretty drastic turn downwards for me. But be sure to tell me what you guys think in the comments below. This might make some people mad because it is kind of a positive video in the sense that I talked about a lot of things that I liked within the series, but at the same time I talk about a ton of things that I don't like and why I haven't really been interested at all when it comes to the plot involving the Spade Kingdom. But I'm for real done now. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And this is Rummy, signing out.
You call yourself a wizard? I challenge you to a duel. The gods will be the judge of that.